how many city ordinance it violates. For instance, the chain link ordinance or the fence on a recorded easement ordinance. To demonstrate to me how important the city manager is, he ended a heated discussion we were having about the fence by saying, "I have spoken," and he turned and walked away. Several years ago, a city police officer came to my door and told me that my motorhome in my driveway violated a city ordinance. He also went to my neighbor John and told him that the motorhome in his yard
Mr.
was a
Brown,
violation of a
your
city
time
ordinance.
is up. If you'll just wind up for now.
All right, 1 minute. Dave had to get the boat out of his yard. All three of us had to abide by the city ordinance, no matter what the financial burden for storage. Some residents of Port Richey have to abide by the ordinances, and some don't.
Thank you. Mr. Roth.
Carl Roth, 8031 Island Drive, Port Richey, Florida. I'm here tonight to talk about roofing permit fees. I spoke with Mr. O'Neill last week, and he said this was beyond his pay grade and it needed to go to council. So my objective tonight is to seek redress from the council regarding roofing permit fees, at least in my situation. Last week we solicited a roofing contractor, licensed roofing contractor, and he came to the city to obtain a roofing permit. Come to find out, it was about, he was told at the time, $713 for a roofing permit. It turned out to be about $720. 20 of that, 10 of that was going to the county, 20 of it was going to the state, and then the balance, $690, was going to the city of Port Richey. This amount I do not believe is reasonable, which is part of what I believe under our charter we're supposed to have reasonable permit fees, and I don't believe this is the case. Pasco County, a roofing fee is about $161. Newport Richey is about $54. Zephyr Hills is about $219. Let's see. Dunedin is $191. I was told by Mr. O'Neill we had a similar approach to roofing fees as Dunedin, and $191 is not the same as $675. Basically, what we're charging here is about 420% of what Pasco County charges, or about 1,250% of what Newport Richey charges. And again, I do not believe these fees are reasonable. And under Section 613, Building Code inspection fees, the city may provide a schedule of reasonable inspection fees in order to defer the cost of inspection and enforcement of the provisions of the Building Code. And these fees are to be reviewed biannually by the city manager and the building official. So again, I'm seeking redress tonight from the council on this subject. I believe this is grossly out of line. Down in South Florida, the high wind hurricane zone, Monroe County, like in the Keys, it's $191 for a roofing permit. So if we want to maintain our city and keep it up, I think we ought to encourage people to do it, and a penalty tax on having this type of work done, to me, is not acceptable. So any comments would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Mr. Dean, Pastor Dean.
I'm here for Leonard tonight, our friend. It's about the backpacks. He wanted me to report to you guys the success of it, and I told him I would. They had it last Saturday, and through people's efforts, they had it at the fire chief's station, along with the police chief's car coming. 160 backpacks were given out that particular day. Salvation Army came, served hot dogs, and all sorts of other food that goes with it. A Jim Priest, and I don't know, but I think some of you do, went and collected $640 from some of the businesses in Port Richey. Most successful backpack program they've had so far. And thanks for a lot of your cooperation. And Leonard just wanted to let me tell you guys that it truly was successful. Now I want to add one little thing while there's still time. giveaway programs are always nice. But giveaway programs, when you get to get something like a food stamp in the mail or a cell phone in the mail, it's nice, but when people actually give their personal touch, such as giving somebody a backpack or something, it's a tremendous push to those people in need. And when people take the effort to go out there and say, hey, we love you, that speaks wonders. And it goes on for months, because I've heard people talking about it from last year, months into it. Geez, somebody cared about me. And I'm saying this to you guys because it's something we all need to keep on doing. And thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Pavlik, I know you've had the opportunity to review the issue of the fence and candlelight, and review the ordinance with regard to that. Could you please share with us your opinion as to the situation?
I had supplied the written opinion as requested. I can kind of go through that in a brief thumbnail sketch. First, took a look at the applicable section of the code, 22-90. The important language in there, it goes and it references property located on a canal or natural body of water. I did a textual analysis. Trying to read the print on my computer is a little small, so I apologize. In a nutshell, since the code section when drafted was limited to the specifics of a canal and a natural body of water, it excludes man-made bodies of water and is not applicable to those properties. The city manager had provided aerial photographs from, I believe, 1941 to 2014 of the subject property. The earliest I'm able to identify any type of water feature there is possibly 1990. It's hard to tell based on the photographs, but it's clearly there in 1995. The earlier photographs from 1941, 1957, and 1974 do not show any water feature there. It appears that this is a man-made body of water, a retention pond or a man-made lake that was built in conjunction with the subdivision that was there. It does not appear to be a natural body of water. Nowhere in the code have we defined a natural body of water. So looking at that, you've got to look at the fact there's no legislative history when this ordinance was made. So we don't really know what the intention of council at that time was. So you've got to look at the plain language of the ordinance as written. And since it specifically excluded man-made bodies of water, right there, I don't believe this applies to this piece of property. That's kind of the first issue. And if that's correct, then it kind of ends the discussion right there. But taking it further, there was the issue regarding the fencing material. That section of the code, the pertinent part says, it's further provided that any such fence shall be constructed with fencing materials such as chain link or decorative wrought iron, so as not to obstruct the view of the waterway by adjacent property owners. The fencing is not required to be chain link or decorative wrought iron. The mere fact that it says such as is providing, these are examples of what would be appropriate. You've got also the issue where it talks about adjacent property owner. Our code talks about and uses interchangeably adjacent, adjoining, contiguous throughout the code. So I think one way we need to seriously look at the code, and I definitely think it needs to be amended, any type of obstructions of view should not reference adjoining property. It should be something from the property line, kind of how council handled the noise ordinance. I I think that's a clear thing, because there's questions as to what is an adjacent property when you're at the end of a cul-de-sac. The issue regarding the easement, there's no way to tell where exactly this fence is without having a survey of some sort, either a survey of what's known as Lake Cox or a survey of the subject property. So we don't know where that actual easement is. It could be 10 feet out into the water for all we know at this point. But going beyond that, enforcing a private easement is not really something that the city should be involved in. That's something for individual property owners to work out through their own means, and I'm not gonna give any suggestions on how they handle it. That's not, in my opinion, something the city should get involved with. I apologize, the font is so small on this computer right now. The issue regarding the height of the fence, the city manager, for some reason that I don't know, is given the authority under this section of the code to waive the height requirement. Generally, something like this you would think would go through the Board of Adjustments and a variance would have to be requested, but not in this instance. The city manager has the authority to do so upon a written request from somebody showing that compliance with the height would create a health, safety, or welfare hazard. The city manager, in his judgment, determined that that was met and waived the height requirements as he is permitted to do in this case. In a nutshell, there's really nothing that the city can do at this point with regard to this specific piece of property. What I highly recommend is amending section 22-90 of the Land Development Code, dealing with the bodies of water, and work it out so it covers all bodies of water. I don't think we need to be specific and just say canals or natural bodies of water. It should, if that's the direction of council, cover these larger type retention ponds that are put in subdivisions. We need to clarify the language regarding obstruction of view. There's no guidance in that as far as what is obstructed view, what qualifies. Is it 50% obstructed, 60%, 40%? And I think it would be best to remove the clause in there that gives the city manager the authority to waive these requirements and require anybody seeking relief from the requirements to go through the process just as anybody else would and request a variance. That's kind of the highlight.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on this issue?
Now, did I read that there was an existing fence there at one time?
My understanding is from the correspondence and conversations I've had with the city manager is that there was a pre-existing fence, which I believe was destroyed during some storm, and it was replaced, a wooden fence was replaced with this vinyl fence.
And it was the same height, but,
That is my understanding, yes.
and do you know when that was put in?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I'd have to look through the correspondence from the city manager. I believe it was quite some time ago. For some reason, 2009 sticks in my head, but I can't say for certain that that is the date that the current fence was installed.
Terry?
Well, I think we better get this on the next agenda so we can start talking about it, because we're gonna have fences popping up all over town. We're a waterfront community. People buy homes because they wanna see the water. They should be able to reach the water, they should be able to fish the water. And when we start building fences over easements and all these other problems that I'm seeing in this particular case, I think it's time we amend that section. It's been
Okay.
my take on what I've heard from the people that were in planning and zoning way back, that when they wrote this, it was their intent to make sure that the city kept its shores open and visible. And it's obvious that we are making inroads around that. So I think we really need to get this on next agenda. I ask that that be done so we can start discussing it and move toward the changes we're going to need to make in this ordinance.
Do we still have comments from mayor and city council upcoming, right? It's just about here.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to include, I agree with Terry, let's get it on there. I think going back several years, I remember this fence issue coming up. When we obviously look at 2290F6 and the recommendation that this section of the code be amended to require any appeal of 2290, subject to the BOA, with a final appeal to the city council, that to me, that makes the most sense. The other is when I think we look down, and first I'll say, well, thank you to Joe for putting this together. I know we're just kind of reading it when we get here, but the amending the language to cover all bodies of water, natural, man-made, clarifying meaning of obstruction of view. And it's interesting, we even state clarifying the meaning of obstruction of view, because we talked about some opacity issue going back years ago when we had, and I think Nancy was here as well, that that discussion was had right then. So even if we need to go back to that, I'm sure that we had some type of 50% opacity on the waterfront. And as far as obstruction, that let's get it on there. Let's talk about it.
Probably need to define, if we're dealing with like retention ponds, define a surface area so that we have not, small little areas being part of this.
Yeah, and that's where I'll need some direction as to specifically what type of bodies of water do you want to cover. You probably don't want to deal with some ditches. So, I can probably offer a few different suggestions, and then we can hash it out.
Correct.
Hash it out from there.
Is it possible we could go back to that case that we had that was presented? We spent a lot of time a couple of years ago, and it would be helpful. I don't know if it's going to be impossible to determine when specifically that was, but to look back at those minutes. But that was a fairly long meeting, and that was a hot and heavy issue way back when.
Yeah.
I went on for
It's not
several
open
meetings.
to the public, Mr. Roth? Okay.
I was just going to add, it seems to me from the reading of the ordinance and my own local knowledge of history around here, but not necessarily this issue in Port Richey, that this ordinance originally grew out of, like it does in many areas that have canals, and just by virtue of the use of the phrase canals, a natural body of water, to me translates into the canals of Millard Bayou and River. These were people that were coming from a different direction than a Lake Cox type situation, which this ordinance, I believe, was probably written around and written with in mind, not necessarily seeing that a Lake Cox issue may come up later on. So, in other words, in looking at the aspect of it where the city manager has discretion, it could be because there are instances, and I can't come up with one, but where complying with the ordinance served absolutely no purpose at all. It was just, there was an adjacent property owner, but it didn't obstruct a view or whatever, and it was giving some flexibility to say that there was in fact some cases where you could put a higher fence up on a natural canal or a natural waterfront where it was not, where it was not bothering anybody, where it wasn't really meeting the intent of the code, yet if you were to have to go through the Board of Adjustment procedure to get an actual variance, you might not be able to do it just because it's very difficult to get a variance.
It is.
So therein, you'd be forcing somebody to comply with a code that really necessarily doesn't need to be complied with in a particular instance, but doesn't meet the rather strict standards of our getting an exemption from the code. So those are just some things to think about. But just want to understand, like I said, I can see this coming very much from a canal-oriented standpoint. I would bet money that this came up from a rash of people that were buying properties on canals and putting 6-foot
There
fences
were
straight down
fencing fencing barrier, hedges obstructing the view. There was a lot of issues.
Right, to where, you know, property owners on a canal or a river, the only view they had was the 60 feet in, you know, back by their dock, because they couldn't see up or down the canal because it was all blocked
does
up.
look from read it that this was an issue-driven amendment or change where
Was.
there was one specific thing they wanted to address, and that's all that was done.
You know, so therein, I mean, I want to keep in mind the original intent, you know, before we, you know, go making changes. But of course, that's not to say the nature of any ordinance, the fact that we can change ordinances means that, you know, that
Yeah,
there's
we're not
there's
bound.
there's a reason why we can do it. It's not written into our charter or the Constitution, but I just wanted to kind of throw
We're
those.
not bound necessarily by what went before, and it's
Exactly.
obvious that what went before was intended for a particular purpose and doesn't fit the current issue, and I think not only before and now that we feel a need to broaden it so it does address the issues of obstruction of waterways.
Right, right.
For reasons that we've already stated, but I think we can get into more detail.
Yeah,
If you've got sufficient direction,
I
we can.
believe I do. I've got, it's probably 95% written already. I just wanted a little bit more direction. Now, with regards to the ability of the city manager to get involved here, I can see both sides. I think it might be cleaner just to send everything to the Board of Adjustment, but we all know how difficult it is to get a variance. Or you could keep the authority of the city manager to make some modifications or waive, but put some more criteria in there. I think the criteria is pretty weak. Just having the health, safety, welfare, whatever the language is, it's extremely broad. You might want to create some framework, or we might be overthinking it to that point. That's the only thing I think I need some direction on. I can put the other pieces together and give some options with that piece. I'm not sure how you want to deal with that, but then again, that can be discussed at the future meeting, and we can make amendments from there.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's prudent to let us have a further discussion on the next agenda.
Okay, and
Okay.
if it's desirable, what I can do is I can get a copy of the draft amendment to everybody ahead of time, and then you can email me some individual comments directly, so I can prepare some responses or stuff, so we can have a more fruitful meeting, if that would be okay.
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 Okay, any other comments from council?
Yes, I have something.
On
Yes,
this
sir.
matter or others?
Hang on, I recognized him
okay.
first, I'll get to you.
The League of Cities meeting. I'm not sure we've attended in quite some time. And in the past, they've always offered, you know, some interesting workshops. I just think it's a shame we can't go. Look, I know we all have jobs and, you know, the time is delicate, et cetera. I was able to attend one of these some years ago, and you're always going to take something back with you, and I think it's important. Just some of the workshop topics that are out there: cloud technology, cybersecurity, disaster recovery, economic development, healthcare costs, leadership, pension reform, telecommunications, working with a small staff, et cetera. They've always got quite a number of topics. And again, you're always going to leave with something. I want to say thank you as well. I know we all received this Quality Cities magazine, and a lot of times they've got some very good articles in there. They had an article, matter of fact, Jocelyn and I were just talking about it just a while back, that earlier, on the paid parking made easier. Just some samples of what other cities, exactly what we were talking about, with technology and mobile devices, et cetera. And she had read it as well. So, you know, it's interesting. There's always something in here. I do want to go back to Mr. Roth's comment on the roofing permit fees. Thank you for bringing that forward. I was unaware. I think we need to get this on a meeting as well. We do look at reasonable fee. When you made the reference to reasonable fees, obviously our fee does not seem to be reasonable, but I'd like to hear more about that and hear why we are so high. I know we don't have a few people tonight at this meeting, but if this could also be an item that we could discuss, maybe in the next agenda, we could make reference to that. Shout out to one of our citizens, Mr. Priest, in helping with the backpacks, and again, your most successful outing, and we know how important that is. So I know he is not here tonight, but anybody sees him, we'll say thank you. That's all I have.
That's where I
Mr.
was
Rowe.
gonna go with. We were gonna mention the roof, but he's already taken care of that.
Okay.
The only thing I think Mr. Roth had a question, but I don't know if you're going to allow it to be asked. Back on the fence issue, I think he raised his
No.
hand. Okay.
Because we're going to discuss it, we're going to have it's going to have an opportunity, this is just council discussion. Ms. Britton?
I just wanted to let you all know that I actually attended the backpack giveaway, and it was a very successful event. It's interesting to see some of the people and what their hardships are, but they were all in good spirits, and that was a great day. Ms. Ewald, the $675, wow, that's a lot of money.
What that is, it's, the permit fees are based on the amount of the contract. There's a standard $40 fee for all permits, and then the permit fee is calculated on 2.4% of the contract rate.
Okay.
And that's where the high cost comes in. Mr. Roth's roof was a fairly extensive roof, and that's where the 2.4 came in. Where Pasco and Zephyr Hills and Newport Richey, they have a standard rate, opposed to the cost of the contract. They have it sectioned per type of permit.
Well, maybe you and Bill could come up with maybe some recommendations for us before the next meeting.
And he comes back in town in the morning, and I'll put that on a list of conversation to bring to the city manager.
Okay, great, thanks. And then just something that I think needs to be brought up. I'm sure many of you have already know what I'm going to say, but the city of Port Richey has lost Mr. David Paris, one of the finest men I've ever known in my life. He was a Rotarian, and he did a lot for the community, and it's very unfortunate that he's leaving us at such a young age. He and his wife live on Manatee Point, and he's very well known in the community as really a mover and a shaker, and he will be sorely missed by many, many people. He's given Pasco County the best of him, and I am just thrilled to call him a friend, and to know that somebody like him was part of my life. So we're really going to miss him.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the agenda. We have the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Then, going to regular council business, the first item is rescheduling of the city council meeting of August 26th to August 27th because of the, August 26th is an election day.
It's in the charter.
Huh?
It's in the charter.
That's correct, sir. The city manager just wanted to make sure that you all had an opportunity in case people could not make it on Wednesday to reschedule to another day.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to be awfully tired on Wednesday night. I can tell you that.
All right. Is Wednesday night okay with everyone?
Yes, fine.
Extra
yes.
coffee, Nancy.
I guess. Okay.
All right. So do we need a motion, Jocelyn? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to change the
Motion.
regular city council meeting from the 26th of August to the 27th of
So
August.
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Finally, on the CBDG agreement extension on the Queener Avenue lift station. Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mayor. What you have for consideration in front of you tonight is an extension of the agreement with Pasco County Community Development for the funding of the Queener Avenue lift station. We entered into an agreement with Pasco County on October 9th, 2012 for the allocation of funds, CDBG funds, for the rehabilitation of the Queener Avenue lift station project. That agreement will expire on September 30th of this year, and we do not believe that the project will be completed by that time. So we need an amendment to the original agreement to be able to extend the agreement for 1 more year so we can complete the project.
Discussion.
That's a no-brainer.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion?
No discussion here.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve,
Second.
extending the term of the agreement.
All right, I have a motion and I second. Is there anyone from the audience wishing to speak to this one? All right. Any further discussion?
No, ma'am.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the agenda for this evening. Is there anything else before we adjourn? All right, we stand adjourned.